Hi, Pastor Steve here for Happy Thoughts at Visalia Methodist Church. Hope you're having a great day wherever you are. Today we are privileged to have Don Roulsten with us. Don serves on staff here at the Methodist Church, and he brings a wealth of experience and knowledge with him. He's been in ministry for 46 years. He's been at our church for 10 years, and I'm pretty sure time has flown by in those 10 years. Yes, Don?
Absolutely.
Because when you're having the kind of fun that we have here on staff, time just flies by.
It really does.
We are blessed to have him on Happy Thoughts, and like the other staff members that we've had on, I'm going to ask Don the same basic question, and then we'll enjoy listening to his answer. So, Don, we know you've been a practicing Christian really all of your life.
Pretty much.
But in the walk of faith, over a lifetime, there are some times when you have especially close encounters, or you feel the presence of God in unique ways. And we would like it if you would share with the Happy Thoughts audience one or two of the times that were most remarkable to you, and times which might give people some courage or some hope if they are facing some tough times. So when has God drawn especially close to you?
Well, when people ask me that question, I guess I think, especially when I was a senior in college, it really was the beginning of my call to ministry. I was working with a youth pastor in Chico, where I was attending Chico State, and having a good time, and was engaged to a young woman that I'd known for a number of years and gone to high school with. And she was at a different school, and we wrote before email and text messages, so we were writing real letters.
Picture Don chiseling a love letter into a rock.
That's sort of the way it was, but all of a sudden it seemed that the letters weren't coming as often as they had been previously. So I knew something was going on, and about April of that year, she was home, and I went to see her and found out that although we were engaged, she was having some real questions, and sensed that getting married in July probably wasn't a good idea, and so she gave me the ring back, and of course that broke my heart. And I remember backing out of the driveway and pulling up and stopping in front of her house, and I started to cry, and I just said, Lord, why me? And as clearly as I've ever heard God speak, I heard this: weren't you praying for my will? And I have to be honest with you, I was praying for God's will. I just was then going about doing my own thing, planning my own life out completely. And so it was there I began to search, God, if this isn't your will for me, then what is? And I went to my pastor and went to the youth pastor that I was working with in Chico and talking, and both of them asked, well, Don, did you ever consider the ministry? And to be honest, I never had. And so that's when I began to pray and ask God, well, what is it that you have in mind? And at that point, I began to sense that maybe God was wanting to use me. I've been working with the junior high group, having good success there and good relationships, and so maybe this is what God was planning for me.
What did you have in mind prior to that, Don? If you were old enough to be engaged, then you must have had at least job thoughts or career opportunities. What were you going to do?
Well, I was a recreation administration major, better known as play for pay. It was a big thing in the early 1970s. The idea was that because of computers, people are going to have so much more time for recreation. People laugh at me, just like Pastor Steve, when I tell them this, but it's exactly true. They thought you were going to maybe a 3, possibly a 4-day work week, and you would have all sorts of recreation opportunities. And so that was what my plan was. So going to seminary, I really wasn't. Fortunately, I had a great Sunday school teachers over the years, and so when I got to seminary, I wasn't totally lost, but I planned to work in a city recreation department, or maybe become a state forest ranger and work like my roommate did. So it wasn't really what prepared me for ministry, but fortunately, seminary does a fair job. And of course, then when you start in ministry, then there's all sorts of surprises, like writing your first sermon and really and preaching it on your first Sunday at a church, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, I've got to do this all over again.
Try one more time.
Yeah. And then you got to do it again and again, like 40 some times a year.
That's right. If you don't know, for pastors, we all think the same thing. After about the 10th time, the truth is, well, I have now told them everything I know at least twice, and I've illustrated it every way I can think of, and they haven't yet done a doggone thing about it. So I guess I should start back at the beginning. Again. And that's lasted for 46 years for Don. So it is of interest. When you were praying about the relationship,
mm-hmm.
were you asking God to bless the relationship? And there's nothing wrong with it. I think most people pray that way, right? We decide, I'm going to do this, and say, God bless it.
And that's exactly what it is. I was saying, okay, this is what I go to do. God bless it, rather than, Lord, is this what you want me to do?
Right.
Is this your leading, or is this my wants? And I've got to honestly say, it was what I had my life all planned out. God had a different idea.
Okay, so what that makes me think and want to ask is this. That happens often in my life too, right? So it isn't like God gives instructions on everything in our lives, right? As a senior pastor, very frequently the truth is I plot out the course prayerfully, right? But it isn't really like God is whispering in my ear or thunderbolting or even having somebody chisel something in stone for me. You do the best you can. You say, God, this is the best I have. So in a person's life, how do you explain or what would be a healthy way to understand why God intervened with you? Do you think it's because what you planned was really outside of His will?
Mm-hmm.
So when a Christian plans things that are normal and seen as good, that are outside of God's will, not every time are they going to hear a voice, whatever, but you think then that engages the Spirit in some diversion tactics?
Yeah, somewhat, but I think what I didn't do, and what I think what hopefully I've learned over 46 years plus now, closer to 50 years, is that you have to act. You can't just wait until God shows you the roadmap, because it isn't that way. But when you act, I think you need to constantly be saying to God, is this your will? Is this your plan? And that's not what I did. I set my plan, and I went about fulfilling my plan, rather than saying, God, here's what I'm going to do, but if this isn't your will, show me what is. And I wasn't asking that prayer. I was just saying, here it is. Here it is.
All right. It's really fascinating, because it does work that way sometimes, mm-hmm. right? Where there is actual, if not intervention, there are at least moments where people really come to the idea, oh my goodness, I have been in a place in my thought process or actions that really is outside of God's will. But very frequently it doesn't. So do you have an idea, based on your experience, not only your personal experience, but as a pastor, is it a certain genre of things that it seems like God intervenes more, and other things, you just do what you do the best you can, right? I think people are really interested to know, how do longtime faithful followers of Jesus, how do they explain these things? Because a lot of people don't seem to experience them.
Good question.
My job.
Yeah, you're quiet.
That's right.
Yeah. I guess I'm really not sure really what the question is, for one thing, but I think for me, what is important is keeping an open mind to God.
Okay.
And a listening ear to that still small voice. For when making decisions, I look back 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, I retired. For a year before my retirement, I was sensing that I needed to change, and the church probably needed to change. Mm-hmm. I had been there 26 years.
Right.
And as you say, you've preached all those sermons and
several times.
Yeah, several times. And And so, I began, searching and asking God, where is it that you might be leading me?
Okay.
And I was far more with an open mind in that than what I had when I was 22 years old.
Sure. Well, a little more wisdom.
Yeah, and a lot more experience. And so, I began searching, and it's fascinating because, you had a hand in my retirement in a sense, because you had mentioned to me that, well, when you retire, think about coming on staff here. And knowing that I had or likely had a place to go, I wasn't ready to start a whole new appointment in our Methodist system.
Right.
Because I was too close to retirement. I believe in long-term pastorates. And so therefore, I wasn't ready to leave, but I felt the need, and I felt the church's need for a transition.
Right.
And so for probably a year, Donnie and I were praying and asking God's wisdom and direction in this. And knowing then, I think in May I came over for an interview with the staff parish committee. So I knew when I retired I had something to move into that was still ministry. I was still relatively young, and but I think that being open and wanting to listen to God and not telling God what I wanted, because that's really what I did when I was, God, I'm going to get married and I'm going to do this. I'll get a job and we'll live happily ever after. But in this case, I didn't have to leave. I felt the need to, but I didn't have to leave. But praying and asking God's wisdom and direction. I love the little passage in James chapter 1. It says, if anyone lacks wisdom, you have only to ask God, who gives generously without making you feel foolish or guilty. Mm-hmm. That's the Phillips translation that my youth pastor that I worked with in Chico had me memorize, almost 50 years ago. I guess it is 50 years ago. And that passage has been so helpful to me so many times. It says, and if anyone lacks wisdom, you have only to ask God, who gives generously without making you feel foolish or guilty. So I think we have a God who wants to help us, to direct us, but we have to open up our hearts and minds to Him to be led by Him.
Okay. Let me see. When I add this, feel free to say, no, that's not exactly what you're talking about. The component that you haven't talked about that I think is operative is that because it's a living relationship with God, it's also incumbent on us to be praying to figure out God's will or to be within God's will, but also to look back at the results of certain decisions and times of discernment and figure out, this is the way that God nudges me, right? So you have to be able to rely on your experience of how God manifests in really specific ways. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, and I think that it depends on your personality how God deals with you. Right. We're very different, and I'm sure God leads us in very different ways.
It's got a big old hammer for me.
Yeah. Well, I've got it's a sledgehammer.
That's right. Yeah. Pay attention, Creel. All right, it's good. So for the folks that are watching Happy Thoughts, right, the part of the application of your experience is that really, if you're unsure how to know if God is leading you in a certain direction, or if what you're doing is what God would have you to do, some of it is to look back at your own life and your own experience of kind of the ebb and flow of feeling close to God, and discern this is how God in the past has taught me, right, what is right and what is wrong, or what is within His will and what is not, and to develop that intentionally, right, to talk with people and to learn to discern, because that's a very important thing. As a senior pastor for all of those years, right, you were setting the direction of the church, and you were figuring out what programs, you were figuring out what needed to be preached, and all of that is the same in that I'm sure you were seeking God's will, right? Mm-hmm. So talk to us a little bit about on a day-to-day basis, not necessarily the unique time, but in that everyday world of a preacher, what was it like for you? How what were the circumstances that would assure you, oh, this is right, this is what God would have us do?
Yeah, and and I guess there are a lot of times I think that we have to take steps of faith without, because God doesn't write in the sky. Right. He doesn't send you emails or text messages. So you have to, in discerning the will of God, sometimes very difficult. But I think for me, one of the ways that I do it is, first of all, you pray and seek for God's direction. And then you have to trust that in what you feel He is leading, then you have to trust that. But I think one of the ways I try to go into it is, okay, God, if this is the open door, I'm trying to walk through it right now. But if this isn't the door you want me to walk through, then I'm ready for you to close it and show me another open door. Okay. Because sometimes, we just have to act without knowledge. We don't have
That's right.
the direction. It's not written in a book.
Right.
And so we have to act, but we have to be open to that door shutting. And I think that's one of the ways I do it anyways. Lord, if this isn't the way you want me to go, then slam that door shut in a hurry.
Sure.
And then let's look for an open door somewhere else.
Right. And a part of what we're talking about is because we're Methodists, right? So
methodical.
Well, and in Christianity, there is kind of a clear divide theologically. There are many Christians who would not have this conversation because they believe God has created everything to be exactly as it is. In which case, there's really not much sense from my point of view of praying or trying to discern. You just go through your life doing the best, feeling like you're doing the best you can. But as it turns out, God predestined everything, so it's going to happen as it happens. That's not our experience of Christianity in the Methodist tradition. We do acknowledge that God has given us genuine free will, and that our faithfulness and our understanding of God's will and how to apply it, those things change and evolve over time, either evolve to a better or sometimes to a worse place. But we're always responsible for the decisions we make. Yeah. And that's what we're hearing as Pastor Don talks about the experience of trying to figure out how do you lead a group of Christians in that way, which is, right, it only looks easy.
Herding cats.
That's right. Anything else that you'd like to talk to us along the same lines, times when God really manifests in a unique way?
Yeah, I guess one other thing is that I remember I was going through a difficult time in ministry, faced some of the similar kinds of things that you have here, mm-hmm. And people angry at you, wanting change, and at that point I felt that God wanted me in this position as pastor at the church where I was serving in Porterville. And very clearly, again, praying for God's will, mm-hmm. I guess it's the one thing is that there was a young woman who was the head of the staff parish committee, and she did something that you probably shouldn't do, but sort of took a survey and finding out, I didn't know if she was going to do it, but what she found was that there was a handful of people who were causing the problem.
Right.
And she had the guts to stand up and say, and so I stood with her at that time and saying, this is where God wants us. And again, I think it was a song that it was popular at the time. It was a song called "Find Us Faithful." Mm-hmm. And that's became really my prayer, Lord. I want to be faithful, and I want to follow you no matter where you're leading. I feel this is what you're leading me to right now, and if I'm wrong, again, you show me. But if not, I'm going to stand firm. And that song, I think it's in that song anyway. Another song at that time maybe. And the words were, "May the footsteps that we leave lead them to believe."
Nice.
And that became sort of my prayer. Lord, just let me be faithful. And the footsteps, wherever you take me, just let that be, may see people say that I'm being faithful to you, and not popular necessarily, but faithful.
Yeah.
And that really was a confirmation of my call to ministry right then.
That's a really
because
nice...
I was really questioning my call.
Right.
Things seem to be falling apart, and I tend to be a people pleaser, and and I wasn't pleasing everybody, and that hurt.
Yep.
And really was a lot of questions, and that really confirmed my call to ministry, and I think that was such an important thing, and I guess that's really the call to every one of us. Lord, find us faithful. May the footsteps that we lead them to believe.
Absolutely.
That's the message.
To me, that as you know, have gone through the same type of process and came out the same place, right? Which is, what in the world am I going to do? And the answer was, well, I'm going to figure out what I think is best for the church and what I think would be pleasing to God, and I'm going to do it. And if they keep me here, that's great. If they don't, that's great. But either way, I'm not going to lower myself to the politics of personality. I'm going to follow my calling. And what I've discovered, and I think what you're talking about, is that's a very hard thing to come to, because it's hard to take actions or not take actions that make people who are already angry even angrier and make them want to hurt you more. But if you're faithful in that way, if you set your mind on what is right for the church as a pastor, and you do it, what you discover is the meaning of what the scriptures promise us, which is there is genuine freedom in God. Right? And that freedom comes from when you're free from worrying about what they're saying or what they're thinking or what they're doing, and you are freed by the crucible, right? To simply say, well, for me, I'm just going to figure out how to be faithful, and y'all do and think whatever you want to. Boy, that is such a huge change in life, and I'm glad that you shared that. So that'll be it for Happy Thoughts today. Don, we're delighted that you were with us. If he gets lots of likes and some friendly emails, I'll have him back, and we'll pick his brain on more stuff. Because if you've been around for, what was it, 110 years?
Something like that, close.
You've been around for that long. He learned a lot more than he told us today. So God bless. Thanks for tuning in to Happy Thoughts, and we'll talk to you next week.